Hi, welcome. I'm gonna adjust this a little bit. We're so excited that you're here. I'm here with my friend Suzie Eller, and we've been spending the day together, just writing, and which accounts for our clothes. Yeah, Suzie asked me a little while ago, "Are you going to change your clothes?" And then I thought, well, why should I? I work in bib overalls, so
yeah.
This is
I just thought our matching plaid would be
flashing. But anyways, so we're so glad that you're joining us tonight on this Make Your Move series. And tonight we just want to talk about the times in our life where we're having a hard time making our move because of some things that have happened in our past, some things that have been spoken over us, and sometimes they just make us stuck. And one of the things that I was sharing with Suzie is this thinking that can go on and on and on in our minds, that is the phrase, what if? Right. You know, what if I had never? And that kind of conversation can get us stuck.
Yeah. Well, and we say, if only, or what if, you know, if only that hadn't happened, if only someone hadn't spoke that word over my heart, if only I had had a childhood that was like hers, or a marriage like hers, or a past like that person. And, you know, Lynn, my story is that I grew up in a lot of dysfunction. And I'm so thankful that my mom, who is, I just think, one of my biggest cheerleaders, allows me to share these stories, because God has done a miracle in her life, and I love her like crazy. But things were tough when we were growing up. And I grew up with this very skewed sense of who I was from a pretty young age. And it did keep me stuck. Like, I remember looking at other young women, you know, in my adulthood, my young adulthood, and thinking I could never be like that. I had so embraced the dysfunction and the words and this view of who I was, that it's not that I didn't know how to make my move. I didn't know that I could.
That you were capable.
Make a move. That girls like me got to make a move.
And what in your life was that catalyst that helped you to move past the girl that you saw yourself toward the girl that could look to have a different future than what you had envisioned at that point in your life?
Yeah, you know, I wish that I could say that it was one single moment. I believe that there's two kinds of miracles. I believe there's the miracle, like in Scripture, where hands were laid on someone who was lame, and he leapt to his feet and, you know, ran away or walked away whole. But I also believe that there are those miracles that over the years unfold layer by layer by layer. And I think that's merciful of God, because I think one layer comes off and I'm like, oh, okay, you know, I now see who I am to Him. Another layer comes off and it's like, okay, you know, I can heal in this wound. And it just keeps going. This is my prayer, is that one day when I'm a 95-year-old kicking woman, that the day before another layer would have come off. Both of those are miracles. Both of those, whether it takes time or it. So open yourself up to the possibility that the Lord is doing a miracle in you right now, right where you're at. And maybe it's not the complete miracle, but there's the scripture, Philippians 1:6, and I just want to make sure that I say this correctly, but Philippians 1:6, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it to completion. Miracle, miracle, miracle. You know?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think that it can set an expectation in our heart if we know that that often that is how God works.
Yes.
We were talking about this an hour or so ago, about often how our healing is done in layers. And there might be a short time period between those different layers. It might be years and years and years between that healing. But all the while, God is at work as long as we are positioning ourselves in a place that allows him to do that work. Because at any point we can shut ourselves off and say, you know, I'm done with that.
Yeah.
I've had enough of that.
Right.
It kind of reminds me, in Make Your Move, I talk about two women, and they both happened at one point in time to be married to David. And one of them, Michal, she had all the reasons to say, if only. If only I didn't have a dad who used me like a pawn. Yeah. If only I could have stayed married to who I wanted to stay married to instead of them dragging me back to David. But no, instead I'm here where I don't want to be. And that is what Michal focused on. Michal focused on what she didn't have, and it said that she developed disdain in her heart.
It's what she couldn't change. She focused on what she could not change.
Yeah. And her heart was stuck. And if you continue to read the rest of Michal's story, she never got out of that place. But if you contrast that to the other woman who was eventually David's wife, Abigail, she also had every reason to feel the same way. She was married to a guy with a name like Nabal. I mean, just saying his name is like, Nabal. And it said that he was mean and surly, so you know that her life was miserable.
Right.
But yet we see in her this beautiful, bold confidence that she was able to approach David, and she was able to do a brave thing because she hadn't let that cause her to be stuck in her life. Some kind of healing had happened where her heart was soft and God was doing something there.
Right. Well, and I see such a powerful contrast, like a really practical contrast here, because there comes a point where I had to realize in my own life, I can 100% put my energies toward what I cannot change. Cannot change my past.
Yes.
I cannot change the words that were spoken over my life. I cannot change the home environment that I was in. But Lord, how can it stop here? How can, instead of me looking at what I cannot change, Lord, what do you see in me that I don't see? What words do you want to speak over my heart and my life that are truth and not the words of a broken person? And I think what happens is we make our identity about the words of a broken person instead of making our identity about the truth of what God has spoken over us. And when I shift my focus from what I cannot change to what can change me, and that's huge. That is where change and transformation begins. A few years ago, I was on a radio interview, and the person was introducing me. And Lynn, as they were introducing me, they said, I want to let you know that Suzie Eller, author, whatever, is coming on. This is a woman I really love talking to because she is so comfortable in her own skin. And as the mic clicks on and I'm now to talk, I was without words because it stunned me that what he had just said was true.
That you had become
that
person.
I had become that person, that instead of looking at the things I could not change, I began to receive and open up to the things that could change in me. And I became that person who was comfortable in her own skin.
You know what? When you were talking about that, it made me think of, I once heard someone say that we know that we are healed, and we know that God has done a work in our life to move us forward when we no longer have to tell the story. Yeah. And do you know that cliche, that phrase people use of, they're just like a broken record. It's just the same thing over and over and over again. I think that when we become like that record over and over and over again, telling ourselves the truth of how God sees us, that is when transformation comes.
Right.
And you know what? Sometimes that old music, it'll still be playing in the background, because unfortunately sometimes we can't control.
Right.
We can't control that. Sometimes it's not the words in our past, it's the words that were yesterday.
Yeah.
Or the words that even you and your husband exchanged the day before. But even that recent words, God doesn't want us stuck there. He wants us to make our move today, right now, this minute.
Yes. Well, and so this is something that I have also learned. And again, I'm not Methuselah. I'm not all wise.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
I'm pretty old, but what I've learned is that my story matters, your story matters, but it's one chapter. It's one chapter. My past, how I grew up, the dysfunction, the abuse, all of the things that happened, they matter to God, and they matter, but it's one chapter of who I am. And when it shifts from being my whole identity, my whole chapter, that one broken record, then God takes that one chapter and he integrates it into your whole story so that it's redemptive. And so what I can do is when I sit across from a young teenage girl who says, Suzie, you have no clue what it's like to be in this place of abuse and to feel stuck. And I can say, sis, I absolutely understand. It's one chapter of my story. But here's some other chapters I can share with you because of who God is that can be written to your story. And so we're going to shift from seeing this as who you are into what God can do in you and through you.
And as you're speaking, there's a section I have in Make Your Move where I talk about doing it scared. And doing it scared isn't just, you know, taking this big step to do something big for God. Sometimes you have to do it scared. It involves forgiveness. It involves just saying to God, today, change my heart today. And we have to do that scared because sometimes surrender itself is a scary thing.
You just described my whole life mantra, which is do it afraid. When the Lord asks us to step out of what is comfortable and familiar, even if we hate it, it is because he's trying to do a new work in us. And so what I have learned and I continue to learn is that the Lord, as he stretches me, as he gently nudges and pushes me out of what is comfortable, even if I hate it, it is because there is new on the outside of that waiting for me to learn. And I might fall, I might fail, I might fall flat on my face, but I am brave because I did it, and you are brave because you did it, and the Lord meets you there. And there is something to learn, even in the falling on your face, because you get back up, you know? I love the Olympics, and I love watching these ice skaters, and I see them throw them in the air, and you know, and I think, how many times did she fall flat on her face before she perfected that? So it's okay. It's okay.
We get up from our failures and do it again.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, Suze, what would be that one first practical step of truly moving past and moving forward from an identity that's been built on our past? What is that one first practical step that you would say that we can take?
Release the words that were spoken over your heart by a broken person, that they are speaking because somebody else spoke it over their heart and somebody else spoke it over their heart. Be the generation breaker that says, I'm drawing a line in the sand. It ends here. I don't know how. I don't know what this is going to look like. But I surrender to the fact that I serve a God who is a healing God, who came to mend my heart, to loose people from oppression. And I am going to be one of those recipients of that because I am going to make my move with his help.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I hope that you have found that to be helpful to you. It's encouraging to me. Every day we are on an adventure with God. And it is not an adventure that is easy. That's one thing I've found walking with God, that it's exciting, but it's rarely easy, but it's worth it. Yeah. It is absolutely worth it.
And can I just say really quickly, I don't know where the book is. I want to hold it up so we can see it. This is a powerful, powerful resource, and I have read it. And I wish I had had this as I was making the transition into the Suzie God knew I could be. So, buy this book.
Thanks, Suze.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. I hope you have a great night.
We'll see ya.
Bye.